can talk about power all day, but we also need to talk about the fuel for our bodies, that is food. And this morning we're starting off with the agriculture sector in the face of challenges and talking about climate change challenges with infrastructure, with security. How well have we been able to manage these challenges to still make something out of our agriculture sector? So this morning we're turning our attention to creative ways to ensure that there is food on our tables and food in our barns or in your fridge, depending on where you store your food. Recently, statistics came out saying that Nigerians can't afford food as much as they could in 2019. So clearly, this is a very existential threat to Nigerians. So we're joined on the program this morning by the director, ecological think tank HOMEF, right on point as well, journals from Asaba in Delta State, Nemo Basi, joins us virtually, as well as Dr. Olufemi Oladuni, the executive director and CEO, Agricultural and Rural Management Training Institute, AMTI, joining us from Ilorin in Kwara State. And joining us from our Abuja studio is Dr. Godwin Atse, who's the country director, Sasakawa Africa Association. You're welcome to the morning brief, gentlemen.
No, thank you.
All right, I see Dr. Atse opted for Zoom as well. But let's get right into it. And I'll begin with you, Dr. Oladuni. I know there are lots of challenges, but I always want us to diagnose the problem properly so we know what kind of treatment we're given. And on the scale of which is most pressing or which takes a huge chunk of the challenges, particularly for the agriculture sector, which would you say is the most important or the biggest? Is it climate change? Is it security? Is it infrastructure? So we know how we begin to allocate our strengths to dealing with them. So I'd like you to break it down for us this morning. Which is the biggest challenge? What is that scale regarding, the threats to agriculture for Nigeria? That's for you, Dr. Oladuni.
Yes. Good morning. Thank you for inviting me. The three that you have mentioned are as important as anything you can talk about food production or food security in Nigeria or elsewhere. But when you look at it, the climate change issue, whether you have security, whether you have the right infrastructure, if you don't look at how to mitigate against climate change effects on agricultural production and other activities, then you have not started at all, because it's daring us at face now that the effect of climate change is affecting food production, even where you have security intact, even where you have your infrastructure intact. You still have to contend with the concept or the issue of climate change in productivity, because it's actually reducing the productivity and then all other activities along the agricultural value chain in Nigeria today.
Right. Let me come to Mr. Nemo Basi. Same question for you, particularly from where you operate. What does it look like?
Well, you've asked a question that everything you mentioned are very important for food production. I can't really say which is number one, but I do believe that in the context of Nigeria, without security, we're not going to get much headway. Climate change itself is a driver of insecurity. So climate, in a certain sense, is very key to tackling the issue of food production, but it's not something we can do on our own, because climate change, as we all know, is a global problem. So the issue for us is, what do we do at home primarily that can help us? And security is number one. Secondly, infrastructure, because no matter how much food our farmers produce in the communities, rural communities, if they're not secure, they don't have the infrastructure to move the food from the farm to the market, then we may have a lot of productivity without anyone having access to that food.
Interesting. So, Dr. Atse, Sasakawa operates across countries, Ethiopia, Mali, Nigeria, Uganda. So is this like a general thing, or is the Nigerian situation just peculiar?
Thank you so much. I think the factors that you mentioned are actually intertwined. And it's a bit difficult to place which one is topmost when you try to rank, but all of them are important. But again, if you look at it, if you try to take a deep dive, you'll discover that the issues around climate change are very, very important because if you look at security, climate change is part of the drivers of insecurity today that we have in the country in Nigeria, and not just Nigeria, but even in the sub-region. If you look at the importance of agriculture in Africa, about 70% of people living in the rural areas are employed by agriculture. So agriculture is very important, and anything that destabilizes the agricultural sector has this kind of several knock-on effects that we can not imagine. And that's what we are seeing today happening even in the area of insecurity. People are displaced as a result of droughts, moving to new locations, and then conflicts erupting. And this is driving insecurity. So climate change, to me, in terms of food, is very, very key. It is a primary driver of the situation we face today, the food insecurity situation that we face today, and we need to address it.
And beyond the drought, one can recall the 2022 event, I believe, when flooding caused food trucks to be moored along the expressway, somewhere along Kogi, and that had a ricochet effect on the price of, agricultural produce moving further down south. But speaking specifically about climate-smart agricultural techniques, I'm coming to you now, Mr. Bassi. Walk us through those techniques, and perhaps you would also want to tell us what you observe in agricultural practices at the level that they are in Nigeria, if it is reflecting in the productivity of farmers, in the knowledge of farmers across the country.
Thank you so much for that question, very all-encompassing, related to the issue of climate-smart agriculture. Now, first of all, let me just place on the table that the terminology or the name climate-smart agriculture is a cover-all for any actions taken towards addressing issues of resilience, issues of adaptation, even mitigation, and also profit generation from the field of agriculture. Now, in Nigeria, sometimes people believe that the only solution that would do this has to be technological. And this is a big problem because it kind of draws attention away from the knowledge base with which we can really improve things. And we need to look at the historical trajectory of our food production in terms of the kind of policies we've been having. Right from the structural adjustment programs of the 1980s and early 1990s, we've had a very sharp drop in availability of extension officers in the Ministry of Agriculture who are supposed to be in the field helping our farmers to adopt good techniques and to grow things in ways that would ensure higher productivity as well as income for the farmers. But as it is now, we're not seeing a lot of that. Most of that, we don't have sufficient extension officers, so the knowledge in the communities is not being harnessed and enhanced, and then sometimes the so-called new knowledge may not be. We cannot push it to those who really need to utilize the right knowledge and information for food production. So we have a big challenge on our hands in terms of that. And we don't see a situation where we place sufficient emphasis on natural varieties, on traditional varieties of crops and animals, which is what really we should be the bedrock of climate-smart agriculture. Should be things built on indigenous knowledge that have been developed over the centuries, things built on using crops that are adapted to our environments, and just working with that to also understand that climate smart agriculture also involves issues of politics and cultural and socio-economic aspects. And so it's all encompassing. We need to really look at everything about the manner of production of food and, drive that to achieve what we need to achieve. And the key concept should be agroecology, working with nature, not working against nature, not dependence on artificial inputs, not depending on risky technologies. This is the trajectory that we should follow. But sometimes it looks like we're drifting away from that.
Dr. Ladini, let's bring you in on this particular issue that Mr. Bassi has raised about agroecology. Are we seeing enough of that, or what are you seeing that suggests that whether or not we're seeing enough of that? Because it talks about using natural and traditional variety beyond the overdependence on technology, perhaps not being the silver bullet we all look for.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that question. And the response of Mr. Bassi has actually opened it up. When you are looking at a set of practices that could increase productivity in this ever-changing climate that we find ourselves in, then we need to look at it deeper. Like he said, we must be looking at how do we work with nature? How do we work with nature in the area of agroecology that he has specified? And that is what we are developing now these days, rather than looking at the other side. We need to work with nature, since the climate is changing the nature of what we used to do before. And also, we need to look at the practices of old that are very germane, like the indigenous crops, indigenous vegetables and all those things. We are now trying to revive it. Why are they, so good that time that we are producing them, and the effect of nature is not too much on them? We are looking at that one, and we have been developing technology around that place to take it to farmers. Like he said, taking it to farmers is a major problem too, because the extension activities is going down, really. You have lesser extension agents, extension officers to take whatever the research sector has been able to do about this climate smart agriculture into the farmers. And that is another area we need to look at. We can develop any technology, we can develop any practices to mitigate against this climate change. But if we can't take it to farmers, then it becomes just like a laboratory activities. But that is not what is going to increase productivity. That is not what is going to increase incomes. And that is not what to generate employment. If you cannot take those technologies to farmers to begin to change the activities, practices, to be able to mitigate against climate change in the environment.
But the question is, are we seeing these practices amongst farmers? Mr. Asir, perhaps you want to respond to that. Do you see the Federal Ministry of Agriculture's policy disposition encouraging climate smart agriculture? Mr. Asir?
Okay, that is Dr. Godwin, you may. Okay, so the concept here is basically for us to see how we increase productivity, but at the same time think about the soil, because the soil is a big sink that can help us to mitigate the impact of climate change. And Sasakawa, this has been our approach that we are pushing with farmers, working with farmers to see how they adopt regenerative agriculture. And we work closely with the Federal Ministry of Agriculture. And I must say that the Ministry of Agriculture recognizes that we have to see how we increase productivity, but also see how we also improve our soil health. As I speak to you, Nigeria was in Kenya earlier this year, and they signed to the Nairobi Declaration to actually support soil health. So to a large extent, we can say that the Federal Ministry of Agriculture is taking steps towards mitigating issues around climate change. I know for a sure that the ministry has been a very strong supporter of climate smart varieties, varieties that are drought resistant. And these varieties, from time to time, we see the Ministry of Agriculture supporting seed multiplications at community levels where these seeds are given to farmers. In recent times, we are beginning to also see the use of solar-powered machines for irrigational purposes in northern Nigeria, for instance. These are becoming common, and we have the ministry supporting that. Kano State government, for instance, in northern Nigeria, has put a lot of investment in solar-powered, water pumps to actually drive the irrigation in that part of the country. And several states are also keen into this. So to me, I see that the government is responding to this, but of course, we need more efforts to be put on the table to address the issue. We must also recognize that our population is increasing, and therefore the challenge is actually increasing. And the faster we move to actually tackle this, the better for all of us.
Mr. Bassi, I would like you to piggyback on what Dr. Asha just said. From where you sit, are you seeing that effort as well? Because it has made some statements as to the effect that the federal ministry is doing some work. Because the Federal Ministry of Agriculture has been criticized a lot for not being at par, not living up to expectation, given the level of food insecurity and all of that. From where you sit, is that what you're seeing? And if that effort is on, how much of it is moving the needle? Because moving the needle is the key. Mr. Bassi.
Well, the Ministry of Agriculture, as well as the Ministry of Environment, are very much concerned about this issue. But we also have to remind ourselves that when we talk about food production, climate smart agriculture, it's not only about farming in terms of crops, it's also about fisheries, it's also about pastoralism. And so are the cattle rearers, are they enjoying any support in this direction? Are the fishers in our coastal waters, in our riverine areas, are they being supported? We don't see much of that. Maybe in terms of policy, and in fact, I do know that the Ministry of Environment, for example, has been considering laying some emphasis on agroecology in terms of climate strategy, climate challenge strategies. But, if I should speak from, I'm sitting right now in the Niger Delta. And, sometimes I get scared just eating any kind of fish that comes from this region, but because of the level of pollution of our water bodies. If our waters are polluted by industrial activities, the oil corporations who are also, who don't really care much about the environment, that tells me that there are so many, it's a complicated system that needs a really holistic approach. Taking care of our environment, ensuring that the pastoralists have fodder for their cattle, and that they're organized in a more strategic way, they move in a strategic manner. All these things are very heavy challenges that need very careful work by the various ministries. But let me also add that, as I said already, soil health is extremely important in terms of capturing the carbon in the atmosphere and helping to cool the planet. And this is why agroecology is extremely important in the whole scenario. Without healthy soils, we keep on destroying our soils with artificial inputs like chemical and fertilizers, and then herbicides and so on, which are promoted by genetically modified crops, which are actually destructive to our environment and will lead to failures and also impoverishment of our farmers.
And I think it's great you mentioned the Niger Delta region. That's a fantastic point to also put in all of this, because when people talk about climate change, sometimes on environmental issues, they think of desertification and encroachment and all of that. But the Niger Delta also has a major challenge on its hands. And I'll take this to Dr. Oladuni. Two questions, really. One, on a scale of 1 to 10, right? 10 being where we want to be in terms of food security, where are we right now as a nation? And you can provide some backing for that. That's on the one hand. The second part of this question, which I'll maybe ask around also, is where lies our solution? Is it in empowering smallholder farmers, the tiny groups, or in ensuring that we have large-scale farmers that can cater to the needs of our huge population? It's a double-edged sword, but Dr. Ladini.
Okay, thank you for that. You know that the organization I work with is an agency of Federal Ministry of Agriculture. And we have been challenged and we have been working the last 2 years in the area of agroecology and then in the area of solar powered irrigation system, which we have pulled participants together. In the last 2 years, we have got in touch with not in less than about 100,000 farmers, as the case may be, smallholder farmers, as the case may be, in this area of agriculture, agroecology, and looking at practices that could reduce the climate change effects on production. So we are already there in terms of looking at it. So on the scale of 10, we are almost very there. It's now to take it inside and make sure we reach smallholder farmers. Smallholder farmers are the key to production in Nigeria today. I'm not saying we don't have large-scale farmers, but smallholder farmers will allow whatever practices you have to get to be internalized as we go along with climate change, climate smart agriculture, as the case may be. So we are moving, we are getting there. The thing is that we need to take this technology further down, which we still need extension to do for us. In the area of the other side of technology, when we talk about solar power, sometimes this year, about 2-3 months ago, we had people from about 14 African countries on our campus on this solar power irrigation system, which what we are trying to do is how do we reduce emissions? How do we reduce carbon on our farms? And
Dr. Ladini, I get the point you're trying to make, but a lot of times we hear about these activities, we hear about these facilitations, trainings, and the rest. And when you look to reality, you wonder, I can't really feel it. And people naturally will tell you when we go to the markets, when we go to the farms, we don't exactly feel these things. And that's why I asked on a scale of 1 to 10, where are we? So we can tell ourselves the truth. We know where we are and where or how far we have to get to where we need to be. But you said we're almost there, and almost to 10 would be maybe 7, 8, 9. So let me quickly ask Dr. Bassi quickly. Do you agree? Are we almost there? Maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, we're 8, 9. Dr. Bassi, and that's for you. And also speak to the smallholder farmer, large-scale farmer question.
In terms of scoring, if you look at the scores for admission to universities these days, sometimes can be as low as 40%, and you are said to have passed JAM. So being there does not really mean getting up to 8 or 9 or 10. I think we probably should be maybe around 4 in the scale of 1 to 10. But the small scale farmers who are the ones feeding the world, who are the ones feeding us, in fact, about 70% of the food in the world is produced by small scale farmers. Industrial farmers produce mostly for industrial purposes because they're engaged largely in monoculture. And monoculture don't really feed us the way we want to be fed. And so as small scale farmers are struggling, they're doing the most they can do, and they just need some support and they need to be respected in terms of listening to them and getting to know the knowledge base and just helping them to do the best that should be done. I should also mention, sometimes we get scared about population. One, Nigeria's population figure is speculative. We don't really know how many we are. When we say we're 215 million, that is highly speculative. We have not got an accurate census in Nigeria, and so we scare ourselves with the population figures. And that really damages our planning efforts. If we don't know how many we are, it's hard to do adequate planning.
Oh, well, So much to reflect on. If we're almost there, Dr. Oladuni, I hope I'm getting the title correct this time around. You know, we have a lot to look at around us for measurement. You know, agricultural yield, where we are currently, and particularly the price of you know, food across the country. You know, eggs is a typical example, but let's look at some of the support services that would perhaps, in fact, encourage climate-smart agriculture in the country. The Ministry of Agriculture is proposing the Agricultural Extension Bill to encourage increased agricultural extension services for farmers across the country. The current rate now is 1,000 extension, one extension worker rather, to 1,000 farmers. But what we should have, according to the government, is 300 to 1. Will that move the needle in any way? And I'll bring this question to Dr. Asare. So will that move the needle in any way? And is government just paying lip service, you know, with a bill? Shouldn't, you know, the ministry roll up its sleeves and work in partnership with state governments in the agriculture sector?
So much. I think just to take us back a bit, if you look at the statistics that was released by the federal government, it shows that today we have one extension agent actually taking care of 10,000 farmers. So it is not 1,000, but actually 10,000. That tells us that the extension system is almost broken in Nigeria. What Sasakawa Africa Association is doing, and of course with strong collaboration with the federal government, is to think about digital extension. How do we take advantage of the digital extension, the digital phones, the phones that farmers have in order to reach them with extension services? So it's a big issue, and I think we must give kudos to the legislature in this regard, because they are very supportive to that bill, and we hope that the bill will pave the way for private extension services, providers to come into the space. If that happens, we will be able to see extension begin to move, and to also see how once we have the private sector come into extension services, we are hoping that we are going to reduce that ratio of 1 to 10,000 that we currently have. And of course, all over the world, we know that information is very key in terms of increasing the productivity of farms. Those technologies that can change the narrative of agriculture are here on the shelves in Nigeria. What is needed to be done, and done quickly, is for us to strengthen the extension system, take it to the farmer. And this has been our motto at Sasakawa Africa Association, and we have demonstrated with evidence that when we take information to the farmer, their productivity increases, their incomes increases, and they live better lives. So it is very important for the government to pay strong attention to extension system. And that bill should be supported, and let's see how we rally round and that becomes a law in Nigeria. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Oladuni, let's bring you in on this particular issue. And the question has to do with some level of extrapolation. How soon should we begin to see some of the efforts you say the government has put in place reflect literally on the streets? I'm going to put up a slide of the inflation trajectory, both headline inflation. You can see that graph. The red line there, talking about food inflation, it peaks at a particular month. I think that should be August or so, July. So you can see that red line going all the way up consistently, and then came back to about 37. It has gone way back to almost 40, and then the headline inflation just beneath it. So we can see that food is a big problem. The price of commodity is quite expensive. Bukola mentioned eggs. We know that it contributes significantly, agriculture, to the GDP by 24%, but year on year, we've seen just 1 point something percent, literally less than 1.5% growth year on year. We can also look at our export. Export accounts for about maybe just 4%, and we're importing 6% in terms of. So agriculture generally is looked at struggling if you look at the data that is available to us from the MBS. So what can you extrapolate as to the effect that we'll begin to see some results? Because this government continues to say, bear it now, we're going to see yields in the nearest future.
Yes, thank you for that. You see, there are a lot of factors that
can you hear me?
Worked on the prices of food, which leads to food inflation and all those things. It's not just the issue of climate change or alone. But when you look at those factors that are beyond the control of the agricultural sector itself, like the insecurity thing that has been mentioned earlier in this program, you will discover that when you have short supply of food, there's no way that price will not go up. When the supply is lower than the demand, so price will go up. When you are farmers unable to reach their farm, no matter the technology you have introduced to them, they must get to their farm to practice it. That one is not within the control of the farmers or the producers along their cultural value chain. So we must put all these factors into perspective for the food inflation to come down. Even forest has a lot of impact on it. If you don't put it down, yes, efforts are there to take us out of food insecurity. But how do farmers or how do consumers will be able to reach them is another factor. How will they get the food on their table at affordable prices? And that is what is driving the food inflation. If we don't look at it that way, infrastructure has also been mentioned. I can produce a lot on my farm. If I cannot get it to the market where consumers will access it, then the price will go up. Transportation costs will drive the price upward. So it's not just what we can do on the farm or what we can do on production. We must talk about those factors that impinge on supply in the market to the consumers to the end point. We must look at that. Even including the inputs that comes in has also been going up because of inflation in the system. And whatever you put in is what you are going to get. So that is the major thing. Yes, efforts are going on to increase production, to increase productivity. But if we cannot reduce or mitigate against all these other factors that are not directly on the farm, then we will continue to have this food inflation.
Mr. Oladunni, beyond the factor of transportation contributing significantly to high prices of food commodities, let's look critically at effort. When you travel across Nigeria on the expressway, there are vast swathes of arable land that are not being cultivated. So the question is about agricultural activity rather than productivity. So is the effort enough in the first place? So is it just minimal and not enough to guarantee the abundance that will force down the prices of food commodities?
I think you are bringing us to another discussion in the area of mechanization. Yes, you have arable lands, but they need to be opened up to farmers. In the southern part of Nigeria, it is not easy to clear an hectare of farmland for agriculture, unlike in the north where you have less. So we need to bring in mechanization into focus. If we must increase the activity in agriculture, we must open up our land. Yes, we have the land, but if you don't have what to work on them, we just be looking at them. We just be talking about potential. We'll not be talking about real activity. So mechanization we must be serious with it. And I'm sure this government is doing a lot about that. We heard about bringing in tractors. I don't know whether they are here now, but we need to open up those arable land to increase activity. An average smallholder farmers cannot clear an acre of farmland. I'm not talking of hectare now. by itself, especially in the southern part of Nigeria. So we need to look at that one very well to increase activity.
All right, there's no way we'll have this conversation without quickly, arming farmers, whether you're a garden farmer or smallholder farmer, with some practical tips, particularly now that the dry season is upon us, with the challenges of getting seedlings as well. Maybe arm them with the kind of information they need to thrive in their little corner. So I'll just give each of us 1 minute to speak to that. Some of the smart agricultural practices that you think can help the smallholder farmers, garden farmers like some of us, so we can get something out of our little flower pots. I'll start with Dr. Basi and then go to Dr. Atse and then Dr. Laduni. Dr. Basi, over to you now.
Thank you very much. First of all, is that every Nigerian should endeavor to have at least a garden. You can plant in a bag, you can plant in a box. Even if you don't need to have a huge parcel of land, let's plant something, at least one crop, or keep one animal, whatever, or raise some fish, whatever you can do. Number two, the issue, I want to quickly respond to the issue of private extension officers. I think that is double-edged. We would really want to see the public investment in extension services and not handing over that sector to the private sector that is always mostly driven by profit motive. And of course, that would also bring the issue of data mining, which could also create some difficulties if that is left to private speculators. Secondly, I think what we can do to help our farmers is to provide a support system for farmers to share knowledge, share seeds, and generally work together to learn from one another. I've seen this done across the Sahel, where farmers have fairs, where they have meetings, where they share information and share seeds. We need to see that happen in Nigeria also.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, same question to you.
Yes,
okay, go ahead, please.
Yes. Okay, yes. We are talking of how do we quickly turn this thing around, especially, some of the things that have been mentioned by my colleague that have just spoken. You can talk about dry season farming now. Dry season farming, where you retrain farmers, which we have started in Amti. We are taking it to some states and some regions in Nigeria on dry season farming, so that whatever they have lost during the rainy season, they must be able to get some back during the dry season without spending much. So we talk about soilless agriculture. We talk about this baggage thing. Even when you are in Lagos, wherever you are in Ikoyi, where you think there is no space, you can have some corridor farming going on. In bags, you can produce your tomato, your pepper along your corridor in your house. So you don't have to be looking for bigger land. And then we also talk about farmer-to-farmer interactive extension, right, wherein farmers who can, if extension agents, as they used to be in the past, cannot reach farmers, then farmers, if you can organize farmers to the extent that farmers-to-farmers can reach themselves, can exchange technology, can exchange idea.
I think that's a good point.
We call it farmer-to-farmer interactive extension, right, so that people can get more information.
We have to quickly wind down now, Dr. Laduni, but that's a very vital point you make, really. I mean, look for the closest farmer to you. Come together. I think there's strength, naturally, in numbers. But Dr. Godwin Atse, that was meant for you, but let's just wind down with your comments, particularly those who have that dilemma. Do I go for GMO seeds since they seem to do better in these conditions, or do I just hustle my way through? So your final words on this for smallholder farmers and gardeners.
Yes, so I would like to say that not all seeds that are improved are GMOs. So farmers should go for improved varieties. Improved varieties are the way to go. It starts with the seed. We must get the seed right. And secondly, they must go for practices that improve soil health. Cover cropping, mulching of their farmlands is very important in your garden. And then see how you use inputs judiciously. This is very, very important for increased productivity. And extension, give them the right extension knowledge. Farmers need knowledge, and we must be able to give them the right knowledge. And we at Sasakawa, this is where we have a comparative advantage, working with the farmer, always.
I think there's a lot to be done, and it must be all hands on deck, clearly. Nobody should listen to this conversation and say, well, it's not for me, it's not my business, it is our business. We have to thank you so much, gentlemen, for sharing your thoughts. Dr. Godwin Atse, Country Director, Sasakawa Africa Association, Dr. Olufemi Oladuni, Executive Director and CEO of AMTI, that's the Agricultural and Rural Management Training Institute, and of course, Dr. Nimo Bassi, Director, Ecological Think Tank, HOMEF. We didn't explore your writer and poet part. Maybe another time, but we have to thank you so much. All the best.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
We'll take a moment now on the show. We have a lineup for you. Talk about self-defense, writing that perfect CV, and so much more. So stay with us right here until the morning break.
Double digits affect your purchasing power? What about ballooning debt profile and scarce FX? How's that affecting your business?
The federal government is turning to the money market to fund its deficits. Are yields contracting or expanding? Is this a good buy for you?
Inflation drives MPC decisions and affects sentiment at the equities market. What is happening to your investments?
Or would you rather go digital? We track all the volatility in the crypto market.
Get the answers from the business team every weekday at 1 p.m. on Business Incorporated, only on Channels Television.
No matter where they are, if it concerns the people, we are there. From community game changers to homemade solution providers, where assurance and trust are built.
Policing should be people from the community who do the job. You don't bring an outsider.
We hear about Amotekun. We've not seen much of them around this area.
Documenting journeys of many starting big from a small place. Creating an intentional community where people go beyond living together to building strong and more friendly communities. Community Report, only on Channels Television.